This is our first meet and greet with finalists for the Executive Director of Schools position. And the candidate for us tonight is Ms. Duncan Coon. She is a longtime educator. She's been with Irving ISD, Hercules Bedford ISD, and more recently Carrollton Farmers Ranch and Venus ISD. She has been, of course, a teacher. She's been a principal, and she's been in upper administration, directing, looks like most programs in Venus ISD that aren't physical plant. So I don't know what the superintendent there did, except lean on Ms. Coon. But she's going to give us a short presentation, and then we will move to a Q&A session. The questions will be moderated. Since this is part of an interview process, we have to be careful which questions get asked. So if you want to ask a question, please come and fill out a slip over here on the front table. And we're pushing questions that are asked by more than one person up to the top of the list. And we'll try to get to as many as we can. Thanks. Take it away, Ms. Coon.
Well, I appreciate so much your visiting with us tonight, and you're taking the time to come and be here tonight. I think that it's wonderful that you have taken time out of your schedule to be here. I have presented at a lot of conferences on a lot of different things, but I have never presented on me. And so it's a little awkward, and I would ask you to bear with me through that awkward stage as I try to share with you in 10 to 15 minutes my life. And so my name is Betty Duncan. I carry the name Duncan in my professional name. That is my main name. And I am a person who really comes from pretty humble background. My dad was a master sergeant in the Air Force, and my mother did not work. That is not true. My mother worked hard. Very, very hard. But she's the one who was sort of the glue in our family. And, you know, from the time that I was just a child, I never remember a time in my life where I thought the question, I wonder if I will go to college. From the time that I was born, my parents were talking about when I would go to college. And in my family, my parents also talked about where I would go to college because they had a college in mind that they wanted me to go to. And I did just that. I list up here that what are my values? Well, certainly the fact that we are able to have the faith of our choice, I think, is such a wonderful thing that we enjoy and we take so much for granted. A lot of people in this world and on this planet would not even know how to respond to that. So I remember to value that right and that freedom. Family, I mentioned my parents. Both of my parents are deceased. They passed away in the same year. And family is just so much a part of me, I can't even begin to explain it. I'm never happier than I am when I'm with my family. Friends, I have friends from the 1960s and 1970s, and once you're my friend, I just don't let go of you, and I really do hold on to and make efforts to reconnect with friends. I mentioned the freedom to worship as we want to, but just all the freedoms that we have in our country and the people who help to preserve those freedoms. I value that so greatly. I stopped working on June 30th of this year. Started working on August 28th of 1967. was a while back. Most of you, many of you were not born. Could have taught all of you, I'm sure. But I cannot tell you how important it is to me to have meaningful work in my life. That is something I've learned about me. I never knew how terribly I would miss it. And that's why I'm here tonight. I heard about this position, and it, to me, fits so much my beliefs and my experiences that this is the only position that I am applying for. I don't have my name in some big pool to just get a job. I'm not looking for that. But I think I would be a really good fit with this school, and that's why I'm here tonight. Continuous learning, and that kind of goes into the meaningful work too, but the continuous learning is something that's critically important to me. Well, I mentioned I started teaching in 1967. There I am. Actually, that's when I was a student teacher. I'm the one in the blue suit with the tall hair. And I started teaching in 1967 in Georgetown while my husband finished at UT. If you're an Aggie, don't hold it against me. I didn't go to school there. I went to school at Abilene Christian College, and I finished there after 3 years. And I would tell you that I got through college in 3 years because I was so smart. But the truth is, I got married after 2 years, and one of us had to go to work. I mean, it was putting food on the table. And my husband still had a couple of years to finish. Then in, what year? In 69-70 school year, I came up to Irving. And I have served districts in the Metroplex ever since. I served as a teacher in Irving for 10 years. I kind of call it my 70s decade because that's where I was from 70 to 79. And in Irving, I was elementary, and then the last 3 years, I went into middle school. I really enjoyed the arts, and so after my degree I went back to school and I got a lot of work in art, and I became an art teacher at Sam Houston Junior High School. The first year that it was open, I worked under Jack Singley, who was the longtime superintendent of Irving ISD. He was, at that time, that was his first principalship in Irving. Then I went from being a teacher to being a counselor. I was working on my counseling certification, and I finished that. And so I moved on to a counseling job. And the job that I got was in Hurst Euless Bedford ISD. I lived in Euless, and in 1979, you had to live in Irving to get a job as a counselor in Irving. And so I didn't apply for a counselor's job there. I went to HEB and got the job, and really, really loved my stint at Bedford Junior High as their counselor. And then I applied for a job at the alternative education program, just because it was something different. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go see what that's all about. But it was counselor / coordinator of discipline management. And boy, did I have my eyes opened about a lot of things when I became a counselor of the AEP in HEB. I had an unusual career move in that I went from counselor to principal. I became, the last year that I was in that position that I just described, my superintendent called in 10 of us, and he said, I'm worried about the dropout problem, and I wonder if you are too. And I was sitting around his table, and I was young, but I was smart enough to know if my superintendent was concerned about an issue, I was too. And so I did learn a lot about the dropout issue, and I served on a committee of 3 that wrote the program plan for the Keys Learning Center, and concurrently at that same time I was completing my mid-management certification, which was like another master's degree. It was 40 some odd hours. And so I got that mid-management certification and became principal of the Keys Learning Centers. KEYS stands for Keeping Eligible Youth in School. From KEYS, I received a call from some colleagues in Carrollton Farmers Branch ISD, and they said, over here we have a job for executive director for alternative education and special programs. And by that time, I was becoming well established as a leader in alternative education. See, this is hard. I mean, you don't just say those things in conversation, but it was true. We had a lot of visitors come through our school and learn how to implement alternative programs. And so Carrollton Farmers Branch I'd worked closely with, they called and said, come and apply for this job. And so I did, and some of the opportunities that I had and some of the things that I learned in CFB, as an aside, I was responsible for federal programs. Well, that's not an aside in a district the size of Carrollton Farmers Branch. It was huge, and I didn't know anything about it. And so you know what I did? I downloaded the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. I still have the notebook with all my highlights as I read the law, which surely there's an easier way to learn federal programs. But I really wanted to know, how does this work? So federal programs was a big initiative. Another initiative that was in Carrollton Farmers Branch ISD was a summer school program, and that summer school program was huge. We served 7,000 kids in our summer school program, and so I hired the principals and trained the principals and the teachers, and essentially ran a district in the summer months of 7,000 kids. And then my last project with Carrollton Farmers Branch that I fell in love with was implementing a program called AVID. AVID is a college preparatory program, and a lot of the Arlington schools have AVID. And AVID helps kids get ready for college. And really, AVID targets the kids that would not otherwise typically go to college, and I know that's not this population, but the way it does it is that it teaches teachers to use higher order thinking, skills, collaborative teaching approaches, the instructional strategies, and the staff development offered through the AVID program is the best I have seen in 44 years. And so it was wonderful seeing kids really become successful students. My attendance rate in the AVID classes in CFB was 99%. The kids wanted to be at school. So when I left, well, I didn't actually leave Carrollton Farmers Branch. I retired, but I stayed on for 4 more years and worked part-time. And essentially, because it was all pretty well in place, I carried on my responsibilities that I'd had on a full-time basis. And I did that for 4 years after retirement in 2003. And then in 2007, a small school district down south of Fort Worth, south of Mansfield actually, named Venus ISD called, and they said, we've got a job down here that's director of federal programs, and oh, by the way, do the district curriculum and staff development. And that's what I went down doing. And while I was there, I picked up the responsibilities for the gifted program. And I really believe that all kids should be taught as though they are gifted kids, because that's what turns kids on, is interesting, doing interesting things. Sometimes we do remedial types of things, and it's just, we do more of the same. I believe there's a little saying, and you've probably heard it, but I heard it from a speaker one time, a long time ago, and she said, and the grammar is awful, so if you're an English teacher, I know I'm using wrong grammar. Okay, incorrect grammar. Okay, but she said, if you always do what you always done, you'll always get what you always got. And that really is pretty much true. We've got to change the way we do things if we want different results. So, some of the career highlights that I mentioned. The first student code of conduct that HEB had was the one that I wrote in 1985, and TEA picked it up as a model student code of conduct that they kind of spread around the state. And that was a collaborative approach. It wasn't just Betty Duncan Coon, but had a lot to do with it. That was something that I was really proud of. And just to develop that program called Keys, that was something that was second. I mean, that's a highlight for an educator. You don't get to do that for someone to put you in a room and say, okay, read and study and see what kids need and then go implement it. That just doesn't happen. And I got to do that, and that was so much fun. Actually, they didn't say go implement it. They said go find the money, and if you can find the money, you can implement it. So we wrote 6 grants and got 3 of them. And when I say we, it was that committee of 3 writers. And one of the other writers is the current principal of Keys, and she was our first counselor, and she's principal there now. During the time that I was there were 10 Governor's Award of Excellence for dropout recovery programs that were given, and 2 of those programs that were recognized out of the 10 were on my campus. One was Keys itself, and one was another need that we saw, and we implemented a post-expulsion program. Chapter 37 now requires all districts to do that. When we did it, it was not required. And so we did get a governor's award for that. Okay. Texas Association of Alternative Education is a program that was started as a networking conference that my staff and I held. And we worked, there were 128 people at the first networking conference, and it wasn't called Texas Association of Alternative Education then, but that's what it became. And actually, we worked with Lonnie Porter from the Venture School in Arlington, and a lady from Irving, and the gentleman from CFB, who was sort of like the grandfather of alternative ed. And then with the Keys Learning Center. And together, we came up with the Texas Association for Alternative Education. And then that summer school that I've already talked to you about was a huge undertaking, I think I had about a $3 million budget for that summer school. Grant responsibilities. I have written and acquired a lot of competitive grants, and then I learned how to do the entitlement grants, the federal programs, and also state compensatory education funds. When I was in Carrollton, my job responsibilities were to manage and appropriate correctly approximately $10 million. And that was something that it was fun to learn how to do that. It's like putting a puzzle together. And so what are all these experiences? I've talked a lot about alternative ed. What do all these experiences have to do with Arlington Classics Academy? Well, I have spent my life in non-traditional roles. I have spent my career thinking outside the box, recognizing issues and problems and figuring out where to go from here. And so the non-traditional, the thinking out of the box, I am innovative and creative. I don't think there is a problem we can't solve. I don't think there is a situation that we can't find a solution to. I just think that we put our heads together, and together we can solve anything. And that's the way I have approached the jobs I've been in, and that's the way I will continue to approach things in my life. So, to me, it seems like it's not a puzzle at all. To me, it seems like that it's a perfect fit with Arlington Classics Academy. I believe that my experiences could really apply to this position, to this school. So, if you were to ask me to come on board with Arlington Classics Academy, what could you expect from me? Well, you can know that I'm going to bring my beliefs with me. And my beliefs concerning parents, from everything I've heard, you guys have it covered. I've heard that y'all have wonderful parent involvement, and that is such a gift for any school administrator. And I applaud you for being so involved in your schools. I also would like to commit to you that you will be involved in decision making and collaboration. Y'all know Foster Klein and Jim Fay. They wrote a program called Discipline with Love and Logic, and they talk a lot about the three-legged stool, and I see the three legs of the three-legged stool to be students, certainly, staff, certainly. But I'm telling you, our stool falls over if we don't have that third leg of the parents. And with that three-legged stool and all the parts in place, there isn't anything that can't be done. There isn't anything that cannot be done. So, parents, I'm not going to read this list to you of my beliefs, but please take the time to read through that. I believe that you are an integral part of the education process, and without you, we surely fail. With you, we surely succeed. When it comes to staff, what I believe is that I believe that it is, as a school leader, whether it be the principal, the director, or I've got to get used to these terms. I'm from a public school background. But anyway, it is our jobs, the leaders of your school, the leaders of your district, to make sure that you've got the materials and the support that is necessary for you to bring rigor and relevance into your classroom. And if that's not occurring, if wonderful things are going on in your classroom, it is much my responsibility, or maybe more, than it is yours. And I will work with you to make sure that you have what you need. I also believe that, folks, we in education don't join this field to torture kids. And our staff members, whether it's you or anybody that I've ever worked with, we go into this field because we love kids and we want to see them succeed. And so I think that we have to keep learning ourselves. We've got to keep learning. If we don't keep learning, how can we ask our kids to? We have to keep learning. But it has to be meaningful learning. And so I just commit to you that if I'm here, we will be a team. It won't be Betty sends this edict down or whatever, or she's going to come and tell me what to do. We're going to work together as a team. I'll work with the directors. I'll work with the directors as a team, and we will work together, and we'll lead this school forward. And you'll be a part of that process if you are on the staff. That is for sure. Now, you might think, well, yes, she hadn't said much about kids. And I haven't. But let me tell you that every single decision I make will go through a filter which says, what is in the best interest of the students we're serving? Now, that might sound like rhetoric, but it is not rhetoric. I'm telling you that from my heart. I have learned that from some good leaders that I've worked for. There is nothing that we will do that isn't in a child's best interest. I went to a workshop a couple of decades ago. It's bad when you count things in decades, but I do, and I'm still having fun with it, and so I just do. So anyway, it was a couple of decades ago that I went to a workshop on accelerated schools, and it was by the person that authored Accelerated Schools, Dr. Henry Levin, was there, and he asked this question that I've got up here. He asked the question, is it good enough for my child? If it's not good enough for my child, it's not good enough. If it is not good enough for my child, it's not good enough. And so how are we good enough? How do we implement things that are good enough? Well, we use some of these strategies, and I just didn't have room to list all I really wanted to put up there. But some of the most important ones, and we hear it over and over again, but high expectations for everybody. Now, I mean that. High expectations for everybody, for all children. Differentiated instruction. We just don't all learn alike, and our kids don't learn alike. And so we need sometimes to do different things for different kids so that they get that aha moment, so that they can get it. Higher order thinking skills, and then the Wicker strategies come out of the AVID work that I have learned about, and Wicker stands for writing, inquiry, collaboration, and reading. Not just reading, but critical reading. We've got to teach our kids critical reading skills. We've got to allow our kids the opportunity to to work together, to collaborate. That's what the real world's like. We've got to do that in our schools. And so those are some of my beliefs. I want to introduce you to my two grandchildren. This is Madison and Grant. Madison is in 6th grade, Grant's in 1st. They are as different as daylight and dark. And yes, Grant loves his picture to be taken as much as it looks like he loves his picture to be taken. But anyway, I'm telling you, and I'm committing to you, that I want for my child to go to a school, my grandchildren to go to schools that have all the elements in place that I've talked about today. And folks, if I want that for my grandchildren, I commit to you that I will see to it for your children. Now that is at the core of my heart and my soul. I believe we do what's best for every child. And that is the end that I work toward. So I understand. I thank you for your time. And I wonder if I'll ever get to use this PowerPoint again. I think not. But anyway, I understand y'all have some questions. I know I've gone over my time.
All right, I'll just use my lecture hall voice. Is that okay? All right. We have a few questions that are about essentially topic of unity, cohesiveness, both in kind of school culture and in curriculum. So if you could maybe speak to strategies for improving or enhancing sense of community and consistency of curriculum across the whole organization.
You know, the state of Texas is pretty clear about our curriculum. We're to follow the text in charter schools just like we do in other public schools. I believe in vertical and horizontal alignment. And I'm not saying that on the same day I should be able to go into every first grade class and see the exact same things happening at the same time. But I am saying that within a 6 weeks period, every first grade class should be covering the same curriculum concepts. And we need to know what those are, and we need to work towards making sure those concepts are being covered. We have to do that, or we're doing our kids a great disservice. We have to do the state assessments. Some of us like it, some of us don't like it. The fact is, it's going to happen in any school that takes public money. And if we don't teach the text, then our kids will not be prepared for the test. And so we must make sure we know where we're going. So we begin with the end in mind. We have a roadmap as to where do we need to go curriculum-wise. And we stay within that structure. Now that should be the same at both campuses. We might get there in different ways, but we stay within the same structure. I'll give you an example of a time at CFB when shortly after I got there, we had an October, why I remember this, I do not know. But we had a meeting on October 28th, 1996. Don't ask me why I know that. I just remember it. We had 1,200 teachers. There's a process that we used to call the Weatherford model that is a collaboration building process. We took 1,200 teachers from across the district, and we didn't let it be all elementary, all high school, all junior high. We mixed We mixed up, it was a vertical team. And we came up, over time, we came up with 8 guiding principles for what we wanted our graduate profile to look like. Now, it was a several-step process, but that was the beginning. And if you think 2 schools are hard to get in line, try 35, because that's what we had. And these 1,200 teachers that we came up with these 8 points. What should our graduate look like? And there again, you begin with the end in mind. If we don't know what we want our 7th graders to know and be able to do at the end of 7th grade, then we're missing the boat. We need to know that. We need to identify that. And we do it together. We do it through collaboration. We work together.
And kind of a follow-up to that, I had a couple of questions regarding ACA's mission and vision. What about ACA's mission and vision most appeals to you, and how do you see yourself being a good fit for our mission and vision?
I don't know what to say that's not redundant to what I've already said, but I really do believe that I would fit into this environment because of your commitment to excellence for every student. I did read your mission and vision. I did not memorize it, and so I can't tell you exactly what the wording is, but what I know that you want for your kids is the highest level of education and moral development as well as any parent could possibly expect. And that's, as I said before, that's what I'm committed to. I also wrote a character education program for CFB and implemented one in HEB. I had, in the 9 years that I was principal of Keys Learning Center, I had graffiti in the restrooms twice. I had 0 fines. We learned to work together. We developed a culture, a school culture that just didn't tolerate. The kids monitored themselves. We didn't have to do the monitoring. But it was through the implementation of a curriculum called Personal and Social Responsibility by Connie Dombrowski. And it was wonderful. So, anyway, I think I strayed from the question.
There was one more kind of curriculum-related question, and it had to do with, let me see, it's here. It's related to mission, vision, and curriculum in that you like our curriculum to be delivered through a classical style of instruction. So what are your views on classical education, and how do you see this being implemented at ACA?
I'm really excited about this school implementing core knowledge and your commitment to the arts. And I buy into that 100%. I have not worked in a school that is a core knowledge school. One of my best friends, the one who is currently the principal at Keys, was the principal of Central Junior High School in HEB, and they implemented core knowledge in their junior high school. And, you know, it just makes education connect. When you're studying the Civil War, if you also are looking at the art that's being produced at that time, and you're also looking at the music that's being played at that time and the books that are being written at that time, I just think that is education. And I, you know, call it core knowledge or just call it how learning should be. And I buy into it 100%.
So related to your discussion of high standards. How would you reconcile the requirement to accept students of all ability levels with the desire to keep academic standards high?
Remember, I talked about differentiated instruction. If you have a school that must accept all students, you've got to differentiate instruction. But what I believe is that you don't bring the level of instruction down to the middle. I believe you bring all the students up to the high standards. I know how hard that is. I don't discount that one little bit. I also know it is possible if we can tap in to what is relevant to them and provide them with opportunities for rigorous learning, they will rise to the challenge. I worked with the high school dropouts, and we brought them to high levels of achievement. And I've just seen it done. It can be done. But guess what? It was my teachers that did it. It's the teachers that brought that about. And it was through their willingness to keep trying with the kid until we found something that didn't work. Maybe go through a different learning style. The multiple intelligences. There are ways to get to every child. It's our job to find what that is.
All right, switching gears a little bit, but still sticking kind of with curriculum. Do you believe in data-driven instruction? And can you give some examples of how you use data to drive instruction and how successful were they?
Yeah. Data-driven instruction is, you've got to know where the kids are. And I think you gather that data, it's a continuous process. You pre-test, you teach, you post-test, you go back, it spirals. It's got to spiral through everything that we do. And so I don't believe in once a year data-driven instruction. I believe in continuous data-driven instruction so that we are at all times evaluating where kids are in our classes and figuring out how to get them where they need to be. I believe it spirals. And so that, yes, in this day and age, you cannot not believe in data-driven instruction. But I think the misnomer is when people take a one-time test score and say, okay, that's the only data we're going to use. We use the data that we gather every day.
Okay. This one's a softball. How would you handle a directive from the board that you strongly disagree with?
Well, this is sort of a cocky answer. Okay. What I would tell you is that they will know about it and you won't. Do you understand? If I disagree with the board, I'm going to tell them how I feel and why I feel that way. And I'm going to try to convince them to feel the same way I do. I mean, that's honest. But I'm not going to go outside of that board meeting and talk about it. I can't do that. That would not be ethical for me to do. And so I would go to the board and I would let them know how I feel. And well, I already said it. I would really try to convince them to fill the one I do. But they're not going to every time because sometimes they have pieces of information that I don't have. And so I think the key to that is communication both directions. Them communicating with me and me communicating with them.
Thank you. All right, there are a couple of questions that relate to 12-year existence in one campus, and then now not even 12 months the second, and about okay, so it's kind of back to your sense of community, but specific strategies for kind of bridging that gap between 12 years and brand new, and perhaps with integration of the staff between campuses.
I had this at Keys, and I keep referring back to Keys, but I'm coming to you from my experiences. But I had this at Keys because we started out real small. And so I had the first tier of teachers. And then when the second tier of teachers came, I'm afraid sometimes they felt kind of like the stepchildren syndrome, you know, and like they weren't as much on the in crowd or in the know as the teachers that had been there longer. I cannot tell you how deeply I believe in staff training, and I don't think in this kind of situation I would try to do it separately. I would want to bring those faculties together every chance I had. I would want them to talk to one another. I would want them to learn from one another. And I think it is something that is a very doable goal. I believe that we can bring the two campuses together, but you can't do it unless they see each other from time to time. And so I would want the principals working together to plan the trainings for all of the staff. One of the most valuable things that I ever did as a principal is that I asked my teachers to, one time of 6 weeks during one conference period, to go and sit in on the classroom of another teacher, a teacher of their choice. And they learned so much from one another. And I can see doing something similar to that maybe between these two campuses. You know, my depth of knowledge of ACA, I'm just skimming the top. You know, I know there's a lot I don't know about the situations here. But my commitment to you is I'll learn it, and I will find out what the problems are, and we'll work together to find solutions. But teachers learning from teachers is the best because the teachers are awesome. I mean, they know what they're doing.
We had some questions relating to your background is traditional ISD, some small, some big, and how you see yourself adapting to a charter school environment. One question was kind of generic, and one was more related to finance. So maybe generally first, and then particularly about finance.
Well, I think generally first. Remember me telling you about downloading that Elementary and Secondary Education Act and reading? I will research charter schools. I'll make sure that I'm not going to come in to your school knowing everything I need to know. And guess what? Nobody else is either. And so if you think that's going to happen, just forget that. I've never gone into a job knowing everything I needed to know about that job. But I've gone into a job with my commitment to learn everything that I can about that job. And so that's what I would say to you, you know. Yeah, my only experience with charter school was back when we started TAAE, the Texas Association for Alternative Education. Charter schools did not have their own organization, and so they came on board with us, and so I got to know a lot of the charter school people that way, but that was a long time ago, and I know the charter schools have changed drastically since then. And so reading, researching, learning. The finance systems of charter schools are run pretty much the same way, except we don't, in the charter school, get all the money that the districts get from the property taxes. And so that's a big difference. And so we have to make that up somehow. And how we go about doing that has to be in different ways. And in fact, I spent about an hour and a half on the phone yesterday with one of my friends who is, we taught together a long time ago, but she has spent her life in the nonprofit sector. And so she was the chairman of the Educational Foundation for Westlake Charter School. And she was telling me how they would bring in additional funds and talking to me about how that worked there. And so, you know, one advantage to having lived in, I was telling some of you folks that I live in the house that we bought in 1978. You know, I've been able to go from, which is in the HEB area. But I know people around the Metroplex. And what I don't know, I know someone who does know it in this area. And so I don't hesitate to pick up the phone and call and ask. And I don't hesitate to let you know that there are some things I don't know. And if you know it all, I'm going to be coming to you real often if I'm hired. But together we can learn everything we need to. I do know that we have to make up the difference in those funds. And so there are many ways to do it.
One of the questions is actually that, so I don't know if you wanted to talk about a few ways we might do that.
Okay, so the Educational Foundation idea, you know, I think, I don't know of it, well, yes I do. There are a lot of districts that are raising a lot of money through their Educational Foundation. And I think that is something that we could look at. But I also think raising the visibility of our campuses in the area, in the community, going to corporations, learning about writing corporate grants to corporations and getting corporations that will support us. Those are some of the things that I have. And my husband is already telling me that he wants to do a golf tournament for us. You know, whoever thought of the idea for the Can Academies about donating the cars? I don't know. But I bet they didn't think it would end up being such a huge success. And they made it such a huge success through their raising the visibility. And so I think we get a few heavy hitters on board. And I'm not saying I know who or how, but I am saying that we'll find out who and how, and we'll go after them. We can do that. So those are some ideas. If you like golf, my husband will love you.
All right, we had a couple couple of questions about measuring effectiveness, both of your own leadership and of the folks who work for you.
Measuring effectiveness of my own leadership. I will seek your input on that. I will ask you to evaluate me. How am I doing? How are we doing as a school? How are we doing as a district? You're going to know more than I know about how I'm doing. Because I'm going to be doing the best I know to do. But if you identify, ooh, I don't like what she's doing in that area, you gotta let me know that. And I'll probably seek that formally at least once a year. Now, how do you evaluate the effectiveness of the directors or of the other administrators? Well, you use the data for one thing, and you use the data to evaluate me too. But I think we have to look at that. We have to look at what the data says about how effective we're being. You have to look at the climate. You know, are we creating climates where people want to come to school every day and teachers want to come to work every day? If we're not, there's something awry. There's something going on. And so those would be some of the things that I'd look at. I would ask the directors to ask their staffs how they're doing. I think that's something that has worked for me, and I see it working. And I've worked for plenty of people that I would have loved the opportunity to. No, really, I have worked for some of the finest people on earth. And then there's some that I would have loved to have evaluated. But for the most part, I have worked for exemplary educators and have learned from everyone.
Okay, you had mentioned high standards earlier. One of the more maybe infamous ways that high standards is seen in ACA is in homework load. There's a question about how much homework is appropriate for an ACA student.
I can't give you a number of hours. I think it depends on what's going on in that classroom on that day. I don't think a child should be in school all day long every day and then come home and have to keep doing school for 3 hours at night. Our children are children, and they need to be developing with us as families without having to be at the desk doing homework for hours on end. Now, you might be able to change my opinion on that, but I hold that opinion at this time. I want the highest level teaching and the highest level learning to be going on in the classrooms, and certainly there needs to be some homework. But the number of hours of homework is not, in my opinion, the measure of the effectiveness of a school. That's my opinion. Okay, does anyone want to leave now? If y'all don't agree with that, I don't know. I think teachers need to talk to one another within one grade level and make sure that there are not several major tests that are going on the same day. I've seen my little granddaughter in middle school this year really not have enough time to be a kid and have maybe 3 or 4 major tests on the same day. Well, who can do that, you know? I think we need to be respectful of our kids as children and have the highest expectation for them. Okay. Don't ask me any more hard ones. No.
Good about that. All right, so what would be your vision of the perfect learning environment for children, and how could you contribute to making that environment possible?
I worked with a lady named Ava Sneaper. She was a middle school reading teacher until I snagged her to come over and teach high school kids how to read. When you walked into Ava's classroom, you saw some desks in a row, you saw some comfortable seating arrangements, you saw some high light areas, you saw some low light areas. What I'm getting at is I believe we need to address all learning styles to the extent that we possibly can within every classroom. I believe that to my heart's content. There are some of us in this room that when we have a job we want to do, we might sit cross-legged on our bed with the TV on and get that job done. There are others of us in this room that when we have the same job that we need to get done, we've got to be sitting at a desk with high light. See, folks, we're different. And a classroom needs to recognize and honor that we are different. And that's what I believe on that. That's what that's what a successful classroom in my definition needs to look like. Now, I also want to hear noise, but it needs to be constructive noise. It needs to be kids working together. Maybe some kids, maybe over here there's a student tutoring another student. Maybe over here there's a group working on a project together. There will be some large group instruction, but if the large group instruction is the majority of the time, I don't think that's the best way to learn. In fact, research tells us that only 7% of us learn that way. And I'm not sure 7% of kids learn that way. We don't learn from just sitting in a chair and listening. We learn from doing. We learn from seeing. Some of us do learn from hearing, but not all the time. And so we all have primary modalities. We all have primary learning styles. And I think that ideally is reflected. And if you're a staff member in here, you might be thinking, but how on earth? Well, that's where we come in. That's where the leadership comes in. We bring you the support that you need to know how to do that, you know. But I'd a lot rather see a guide on the side rather than a sage on the stage. And I think more learning occurs when there is somebody that is guiding me through my learning process rather than telling me what they know. Okay. Working in alternative education, and I can't help but pull from that. But working in alternative education, and I'm not talking about discipline programs. I'm talking about non-traditional high school. That's what KEYS is, a non-traditional high school. It is not a program for kids that can't make it anywhere else. It's a program for the little girl that had a heart transplant and needed to go to school a fewer number of hours. It's, you know, so it's a non-traditional high school environment. That's what I'm talking about. But, okay, now I lost it. I don't know for sure where I was going with that, but it will come back. Trust me, it comes back. So when it does, I might tell you what it is that I was thinking of at that time. Well, okay, can you repeat the question? Maybe that'll help.
Well, now you put me on the spot.
Okay, sorry. Go.
This was the, yes, it started off with a appropriate overview. This was
well, it's okay. It'll come back through. It will.
oh, what was the perfect classroom environment?
Yeah.
And what would you do to help that, bring that environment to be?
Yeah. You know, there is a training I'd love to bring to your teachers is from a book called Quantum Teaching. And it is just, do y'all know Quantum Teaching? It is a book that's written by a lady named Sarah Singer Norrie and two other people. Why I can remember her name and the other ones that are easier, I can't. But don't even ask me to try. But Sarah, I've met. She wrote this book, and it just is a compilation of the best practices. And it talks a lot about multiple intelligences and learning styles. And we all need that training. I mean, and it's fun. It's fun. I'm not going to bring you boring training. It's fun. And so that's what I would say. Yeah, I think I've answered it well enough. Okay.
Can you give an example from your past of a pressing community issue that affected education, and what methods you used to address that issue and how it was resolved?
A pressing community, okay, may I ask you, do you think that means within the school community or outside of the school community?
Donovan, how about you?
Either one.
Either one? A pressing community issue and how it was resolved. Well, the pressing community issue goes back to within the school. Back to that example I gave you before about bringing in the second tier of teachers and finding a way to bring them together, which we eventually did. Oh man. You know, the city of Farmers Branch passed a law that I don't remember exactly what their law said, but it essentially was trying to keep immigrants out of Farmers Branch, Texas. And they passed a law that made apartment managers check the citizenship of the people that were there, or the legal records like the green cards. Well, that presented a huge problem in Carrollton Farmers Branch ISD because we had parents that didn't want to tell us information that we needed to know. And so one way that we resolved that issue is that we worked with that massive community in Farmers Branch, and we developed a parent education program, we developed a citizenship program, we developed an adult education program that built trust between the school and the community. And over time, we were able to help them understand that we weren't going to go reporting them to the city. You know, that was one entity and we were another. But it was hard. It was hard. But you just dig in there as those issues come up and you together find ways to address them.
One more question before we wrap up. Based on the knowledge that you have of ACA, what are the most pressing issues facing us, and how do you plan to address those issues?
I think the most pressing issues we have, I know there's some financial issues too, or I think there's, some financial issues. But I think the most pressing issue we have is the one that you've talked about tonight regarding the community and bringing the schools together. That'll kill us if it's not addressed and fixed. What I mean by that is that what we want is a huge waiting list because people are clamoring to get into this school. And I know that it does have a good reputation, and it's enjoyed a good reputation for a long time. And we don't want word of any kind of dissension or any kind of problems to be the first thing community people think about when they think of ACA. We're always going to have problems. We just deal with them, But we don't want that to be the first thing, problem issues to be the first thing that people think about. And so I think number one is finding a way to bring us together and finding a way that we work together and define our standards of excellence and what that means to us as a whole staff and parent community. And then I believe the rest falls in place. See, I believe the rest falls in place because I've just seen it happen. We've got to stand as one, and we've got to believe in what we're doing, and we've got to talk about it in the community. So that's what I would say.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your time and questions.